Hi, and welcome to the predictions based on astrology for the week of February 17, 2020. First, let's quickly go over the predictions that I made for the previous week. In terms of the stock market direction, I normally track two indexes, Nasdaq and Dow Jones, and the predictions were correct for one of the days, incorrect for two of the days, and for two of the days, indexes went into the opposite directions, and so I guess the predictions and the results were mixed. In terms of the increased seismic activity and increased news about leaders passing away or stepping down and or reshuffling at the heads of corporations and or governments, which is something that we will continue experiencing to a greater degree than usual through the end of this year. There was news about Mount Arapi basically erupting in Indonesia, although I didn't see too many news about other major earthquakes. That said, I do expect this to pick up starting end of February through about early April and especially at the end of March. In terms of leaders stepping down, there was a Google HR chief that stepped down, I guess, last Monday and also this Tuesday, and I'm recording this already on Tuesday, the 18th of February. There was news about CFO and CEO of DuPont, I believe, also stepping down effective immediately. There's also, of course, news from Great Britain about Boris Johnson reshuffling the cabinet there as well. So let's see. In other news for previous week, I made predictions that there would be increased focus on the value of pharmaceuticals or healthcare products, and or increased news about medicines that specifically would heal shotgun wounds, or emergency treatments or treatments related to head and or blood sugar. And of course, head had to do with areas being prominently featured, and that's sort of the area that it corresponds with astrologically, and as well as any sort of wounds that are sustained during war or fighting. And back then, on the 10th of February last week, there was news that came up that over 100 US troops have been diagnosed with brain injuries from Iran attack, I guess some weeks before that. And that was a more than 50% jump from the number reported previously. I also predicted for US specifically last Monday that there would be stressful news related to either leaders or some sort of opposition between sort of maybe a new development or new initiative that would aim to increase US status on the world arena, but that would be somehow at odds with some sort of domestic issues or domestic development, and somehow maybe undermine or provide some difficulties for some domestic companies or businesses, especially related to either banks or food production or real estate, farming, etc. And there was news, I guess, that sort of proposed or some thoughts on ideas. I'm not sure what exactly the status of that proposal was, but basically Trump's administration came up with some ideas for the budget, and indeed in that budget there was a proposal cut to some of the social safety net programs, such as education and Medicare spending. So basically tightening, for example, eligibility for some of these programs, such as Social Security, Disability Program. So something that would be affecting, safety and security of folks at home. And so I would say that was a good manifestation of that. Let's see, another prediction that I made also for US specifically, that there would be increased focus on workforce and either the needs or benefits of the workers. And there was on last Monday there was news that US judge had rejected requests by Uber Technologies and also the Postmates to block California labor law that basically would, I guess, help drivers, I suppose. And basically that was to support public benefits. And there was also, of course, this news of Google HR's chief stepping down because of some unrest among workers, would also, I guess, fit and as a manifestation of news that relates to like workforce and workplace and conditions for the workers. Let's see, and in my predictions that I have already for this week that I have already published on my blog at lasunka.com day before, I had made predictions for US that will actually be somewhat long-term, starting early 2020 and running into even 2021. And that will have to do with focus on things like basically some concerns for large corporations that were in place for a long time. Those may be experiencing some major either reorganization, or there may be some increased controls over either spending or sort of loans that they may take, and or they may declare bankruptcies, and or there may be some major projects related to some domestic issues, specifically focused on either farming, food industry, or protection of children, protection of women, motherhood, sort of childbearing kind of issues, even procreation. And there may be some either new laws along those lines or just new governmental controls imposed on some related either businesses or activities, for example, to maybe some controls to and efforts to prevent like spying and hacking to protect, those corporate assets, or, even, I suppose, secrets, or initiatives to improve homeland security, or efforts to improve safety of women and children, or some restructuring of businesses, again, most likely large established corporations, and it may have to do with either them say they were hacked and they lost information, so that there will be a need for major reorganization or improvement of their security policies, for example. Or it could be, maybe something to do with like coal and mining company, and again, whatever they did maybe is undermining the safety of some farmlands or something like that, and again, something major may need to be done, again, not just like a slap on the wrist, but some sort of a major sort of big deal about it, where the company may need to go bankrupt, or they need to really come up with a major reorganization of how they do business, again, because of safety concerns, and or because government imposes stricter controls. So something along those lines, and again, this is an ongoing influence that will be at least in place for a year or two, and it may result, like I said, with major restructuring, major reorganization, including bankruptcies. And we already had, literally on the 18th, the announcement by Boy Scouts of America that they are filing bankruptcy, and that has to do, I guess, with perhaps that's a move by that organization to postpone, I guess, the legal cases they have pending against them due to the sexual abuse allegations against, I guess, many of the, I'm not sure, people who work there or something like that. So, and specifically for Boy Scouts of America, this is something that may last for many months, and or we may hear more about sort of situation like that, where there's some criminal activity or spying or hacking, even terrorist activity, and or some other deviant behavior. This has to do with like Pluto, which is why I'm mentioning something that's hidden, something unsavory, something criminal. And yes, it may involve education, it may involve children, but it also may involve like farming lands, food, and of course food safety. Of course, like children and pregnant women may be affected more, and or literally it may have to do with human procreation. So and anything to do with loans, debts, something where basically corporations or entities that were in power, they may lose that power, or they may keep the power, but they may need to sacrifice something or go through major reorganization, this kind of a death and rebirth experience, so to speak, in order to basically continue, to do what they're doing. And that's a slowly unfolding experience, a slowly unfolding influence, so there may be many sort of events along those lines unfolding in the upcoming months. Let's see, and I also made predictions. This is already, I guess, for this week. So maybe we can smoothly move into this week for February 18th. And of course, Monday, the 17th, markets were closed. For the 18th, I was predicting the markets would go down, and Dow Jones was down, although NASDAQ had ended up being like 0.02% up. In terms of news for US, on the Tuesday, I was expecting increased news about finance, earnings, real estate, banks, as well as banks' assets like, of course, land, real estate, like I said, land, farming, food industry, and, some changes in the value of related products and businesses. And I did see that on Tuesday there was an announcement about Franklin Templeton is said to acquire Legg Mason in the all-cash deal valued at $4.5 billion. I also made a prediction that's like a global prediction for 18th through the 21st approximately, that this would be a good time for or favorable conditions or some positive improvements for businesses related to IT, aerospace, telecoms, electric power, electric cars, high tech, some sort of innovative technologies, even related to like mining or engineering, something high tech, cutting edge, and or involving, like I said, rockets, space, flying, etc. Like projects may be progressing at sort of higher speed than usually, or there may be a green light for like a government provides a green light for some projects to begin, or permission is given, or they receive funding. And in particular, it may involve also cryptocurrencies and or some sort of way of paying or transacting online. Now, I didn't actually, so far at least, I'm recording this on the 18th, see necessarily a lot of positive news for these, I guess, in these areas. In fact, I did see news that General Electric stock was hit by the report that the sales of the engine, I guess, that they produce to China may be blocked, that the Trump administration is considering blocking that because they don't want really, they're concerned that, I guess, Chinese will steal, I guess, they will figure out how to basically create those engines themselves. And so was it the intellectual property infringement? So in that sense, I guess it's a negative news, certainly for GE and the stockholders. At the same time, I suppose it could be seen as positive news for, I guess, from the perspective of Trump organization, that they're trying to, improve the safety of the intellectual property, I guess, or safety of the American businesses, by at least thinking in those terms. So everything is relative, but we did see increased sort of news, at least in one of those areas, which is both the electrical company and, again, we have the aerospace related topic, but I expect this to continue. Sort of more news like that may come through the 21st of February. So let's see, for Tuesday and Wednesday, I think the market will go down, not a very high percentage confidence, but still looks slightly kind of more down. And then on Friday, things looking up a little bit better. So Friday, I think the market may go up. As far as other kind of influences for US, February 19th and 20th, which is Wednesday, Thursday, may see increased news about like government or corporate authorities, status in the world, as well as banks, finance, taxes, earnings, rates, etc. And there may be some concerns that either earnings or expenditures are somehow imbalanced, or something is like done improperly and is not authorized, like expense wasn't authorized or not processed correctly, or even say there are earnings or profits but they weren't processed the predictable sort of established manner. So maybe say the money was transferred in an insecure way, or the transaction or offer was made for sale, for example, or acquisition, but it's not backed up by sufficient funds. So something is kind of iffy, or the purchase, was impulsive, not well thought out, and not all things were sort of considered pros and cons correctly. So maybe even, I don't know, maybe it's just, Franklin Templeton potential acquisition of like Mason will be criticized. I haven't seen that, but it would be something along those lines, like a large acquisition perhaps, or a large expense, maybe a governmental project that may be seen as like too rash. You haven't considered pros and cons, kind of, or there are insufficient funds, or funds are there, but they're kind of being criticized by sort of they're going in the wrong directions, and or there may be news about increased taxes or insurance, and again, but this may not be perceived as like, okay, we're doing something positive, but rather it will be like something that is done as a waste, or because it's too fast, or it's not considered, or not everything was considered before the decision was made. For China, February 19th may see increased sort of news or increased concerns about financial losses or expenses, especially related to all these Neptunian matters like gas, oil, pharmaceuticals, healthcare, drugs, poisons, navy beverages, movies, etc. And the worries may have to do with either a lack of clarity, uncertainty, and of course we may have not enough news about coronavirus outbreak, but it could also relate to any of the other Neptunian areas such as oil prices, water pollution, how some drug works, or maybe like I said, water pollution, how is something being disposed of, a certain beverage is safe. So it could be one or more of these areas. Then on Thursday, like I said, the market I think will go down, but the down influence is primarily, is probably going to be stronger. It's going to be stronger in the morning, and by afternoon and by Friday, I think market may go up. So for China, February 20th and 21st may see probably important and likely positive announcement about some profits, finance, banking, etc. And there may be perhaps a new initiative announced in financial sphere, or some new project that is somehow daring or quick or ambitious or even risky, that's looking to kind of bring quick profits or bring quick results, and or the project, some financially related projects may be sort of expense or way of increasing earnings, somehow may be related to military and or sports. So the focus here may be on kind of moving fast, taking greater than usual risks, or expecting this high quick turnaround. So I'm not sure if it will be using military to make something happen, or perhaps sales of weapons, or anything to do with sports, maybe using some athletes to accomplish something, as some spokespersons, or literally earnings may be related to some sports events, for example. So on Friday, market may go up, and for US, 21st of February looks like a positive day where there may be improved sort of news or happier news than usual about like earnings, international agreements, and finance. And particularly they may be related to IT, aerospace, telecoms, electric power, electric cars, high tech, as well as communication, transportation. For some reason it says transpiration on my blog. And retail sales. So all of those areas may see positive news, and those could be like about, say, growth of new sales, favorable agreements that are reached, improved some conditions for transporting goods or people. So like I said, Friday looks positive. And then the quick sort of preview for the upcoming months. As I said before, end of February through early April may see kind of increased tensions, both like geopolitically, so maybe around US or some other countries that are perhaps experiencing tensions along their borders, and or there may be, especially at the end of March, we may expect again really large earthquakes or some other seismic activity, as well as increase in like protest, violent attacks, be it sort of anti-government protests or terrorist attacks, or just accidents, explosions, fires, or other disasters, especially those that involve like hidden dark locations, mountains, underground locations, so perhaps some sort of a recycling facilities, it catches fire, or even nuclear plants, cyber attacks, fires, like I said, electricity, maybe there's a really violent storm, or just some other reason where power supply goes down and perhaps it affects like cloud providers. So basically some disturbance there. And there may also be increased military threats, tensions, posturing, etc. So this could be related to US-Iran tensions, US-China tensions, and it may be unfold, like I said, it may involve military and or cyber attacks, especially cyber attacks are likely around March 22nd. And those may be followed by some more attacks or just accidents, or if things may just be happening in parallel that involve either electric grids, internet, networks, as well as airplanes, drones, some sort of anything that's flying fast, blows up or starts a fire, as well as at the same time it would be a violent time where some leaders, perhaps, some countries, some dictators, etc., or some corporate leaders may be either removed or stepped down, displaced, etc. And similarly, looking further than June 8th through 15th, may see also some sort of more kind of turbulent times. And in particular, we may hear sort of more more news about like healthcare related issues, pharmaceuticals, or accidents or involving fires, athletes, or even Navy, water, so maybe some vessel catches fire, like we had news back in January about like marina catching fire. So something to do with this fire and water, basically maybe a volcano erupts that's, surrounded by a body of water, or attack on a ship, or a fire at an oil rig, or explosion at a chemical processing facility or something like that. And at the same time, it may be accompanied by some greater moves in the stock market, particularly June 9th through 12th, and there potentially may be a drop. And at the end, just to quickly, I guess, repeat what I had already mentioned previous couple of weeks, but for those who haven't heard this before, basically I looked at China coronavirus outbreak indications in China's chart, because this seems to be the country that's the most affected, and this already was something that I predicted back, for China, that they will be undergoing some reform or some major changes in their healthcare, sort of pharmaceuticals kind of related areas from 2018 through 2020, and that's because we have Pluto going through that area, and now it's conjuncting China's Jupiter, which leads to expansion of all of this. And it's actually a positive thing in the sense that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Unfortunately, in this case, we actually have many thousands of people died by now, unfortunately, but basically the influence is such that it would potentially require China to kind of undergo some reform or some drastic changes in that area, meaning, again, pharmaceuticals, healthcare, but also pollution, drugs, and places that are hidden, or things that are done in secret, and or basically also potentially related to oil, navy, and any of these other dependent areas. And the influences indicate that this whole coronavirus outbreak or similar topics, again related to pharmaceuticals or epidemics or something spreading that is not easily seen and potentially spreads through water or fluids, and spreads in the facilities that, again, are like prisons or secluded areas, hospitals, monasteries, all of those places. We'll have more of those places, and of course they're building more hospitals, or it will be expanding in those places, and of course the quarantine is kind of like you're secluded, you're like in prison. So all of that is continued to sort of expand these kind of news, and the period of August through November looks like it's going to be the most intense, and in particular in March, periods of like March 17th, 22nd, then July 11th, 12th, and November 9th and 13th may see some increased kind of focus on some topics, so maybe increased numbers or some announcements related to perhaps the death toll or some investigation results or some discovery or some basically peak times of where there may be some noteworthy events or announcements. And after those kind of peak times, there may be some perhaps period of some weeks of either kind of things kind of calming down, but then again, not until November, I think things will start calming out sort of for good. And kind of moving really further into the future, I also looked at previous epidemics like a flu or some other big problems, and I have already mentioned this in my annual predictions that, you know, we had news like about HIV, for example. This was under the same transit of Pluto and Saturn that we have right now. But something like Spanish flu of 1918 was actually under Saturn-Neptune conjunction transit, and this is something we will have coming up in 2025, 2026, and at the same time, about the same, I guess, time periods also correspond with transits to US chart that typically indicate changes, fluctuations in gold and or silver prices, which of course, I guess gold as being safe haven goes up at the same time. So that's sort of like this additional indication that there may be some kind of a significant events, and they may affect more than just, you know, healthcare, but it may affect, you know, gold prices. And on top of that, Neptune also has to do with oil, of course, and gas prices, which we do see being affected and being suppressed by this coronavirus epidemic. And we had oil prices drop significantly under the recent Neptune square Saturn, and under conjunction that will be probably in even greater sort of a time. Again, doesn't have to be a drop, but it could be just some sort of peak, again, top or bottom, and that's again same thing 2025. And on top of that, we have Neptune going in 2025 into a new sign after it spends quite some time in Neptune in Pisces, which it rules, so it's comfortable in Pisces, is going to Aries, which is a fire sign. And of course, then water dries up, and or water and, you know, heat. We have things that are exploding, you know, chemicals that are exploding. So maybe sort of focus on chemical warfare, or maybe drought where there is not enough water, and so there's, you know, or something like cholera or dysentery, where we have like water that's polluted, water that's leading to inflammation, or water that's, you know, either, like I said, too dry, too hot, boiling water, or literally water that's like causing some problems, meaning, and by water it could be beyond that, it could be psychological warfare, or it could be some sort of a drugs or something that's alter, you know, state of mind of, say, soldiers, something like that. Or it could be, you know, of course, bioweapons, because Aries also is the sign that rules things like war. And of course, it rules also things like sports. So there will definitely be a lot of focus on either enhancing performance, could be in some legal ways, I don't know what those might be, through healthcare, medicine, some sort of, you know, maybe even changing your state of mind to achieve, you know, greater achievements in sports. It doesn't have to be negative, or it could be sports that are, again, in your mind somehow. So, you know, yoga becomes, not yoga, but I mean like meditation becomes a sport. Who knows? But basically could also be, of course, great emphasis on doping, and that may be really like a war on that, war on drugs, again, picking up. So something along those lines, just something to, I guess, ponder on and or make some long-term plans for investors. And this is not a professional advice, it's just something that I think is interesting to observe in terms of just pattern that are corresponding to some astrological transits have corresponded in the past, and we'll see if they will actually correspond in the future. So that's it for me for today, and I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll come back and check me out next week. Until then, catch you guys later. Have a wonderful week, everybody.